Welcome back to the show, Georgeonsports, with your host, myself, George Egator. On today's episode, I'm really excited, by the way, and I don't know if you guys can tell, I've been waiting to speak to Kaleb for a while. We got Kaleb Leach here, who went from playing ball in the States to becoming a sort of worldwide international football scout. So before we do get into the show, Kaleb, thank you very much for joining me on today's show. And how are you?
I'm doing well, man. Thanks for having me. I'm really excited, man. I really love your energy. And I remember when you hit me up, I was like, heck yeah, I'm doing this. Like, let's rap. Let's share the stories.
I love that. I honestly, like, guys, anyone that knows me, like, for Kaleb, I've played football in the UK for 11 years now. And obviously you have an idea of what the ball's like over here. But I always find it interesting to hear people's stories off the field, on and off the field, outside of the UK. And your story in particular is one that I've been keen to hear. So let's get into it and start with your exposure to football. And what was your first introduction into the sport, and how did that actually come about?
Yeah, growing up in the States, it's similar to a lot of friends and family members of mine, or stories you've heard. My dad played football, so shout out to Pops. My brothers played football. My older cousins played football. And I guess the first introduction I ever had was at one of my dad's college practices, and I was like 4 or 5 years old. And there's a picture of me running out mid-game and trying to steal the ball off the sideline because it went out of bounds. And that was it. And then my brothers being like really big in football. I'm the baby brother in my family, and these guys, like, they played for the top high schools in their state. They won state every year. They were going to college scholarships. So I was just like, well, I guess I'm gonna play and like see what I can do with it. It turned out to be pretty nice in middle school and high school. Went on to college at Florida Tech University. Did the little grad school at the University of Toronto. Tried out for the Argos for like a day. It was pretty short, and poof, I took off across the world and started my next bit of the journey.
And you played running back, is that right? Or a bit of a hybrid?
Yes. I was a running back, slot receiver, safety, kick return, punt return. I was a little dude who was like, all right, he's an athlete. He can play ball. Let's see what we can do with him. I was good until my shoulder started getting banged up, to be honest. My shoulders dislocated a lot through my high school and college career, and it just started to slowly chip away. And that's when I had to wrestle with how long am I really going to play the game.
I mean, albeit I've played in the UK for as long as I have, I can understand. And I play running back too, by the way. So I know what you're talking about when you talk about your shoulder. The injuries add up. They definitely add up. And it's part of the reason why I actually stopped last year, to be fair. But in terms of your playing career, because I've seen some footage and you definitely had the juice, man. You had the goods, man. You had the goods to play for sure. But you also took your talents to Europe and beyond, from what I've seen.
Yep.
And how did that come about?
So in college, I had a few friends approach me about possibly playing in Europe, possibly playing in Japan. And I was like, heck no. That was the PG version of my answer. Like, I'm not going. Like, there's no way I'm going out there. It's too far. No one's going to like me. I won't make enough money. I need to pay off my student loans. I won't be happy. Any negative idea, thought, excuse that I could think of that said I'm not going, I used it, and I was terrified. I was very scared. And it was around 2017 in Canada, because I'd finally left the U.S. I was in Toronto. Toronto's my favorite city in the world, best city in the world. I'm sorry, you guys can argue with me if you want, for best city in the world. But someone there, one of my coaches there, had played in Germany. And he pulled me aside and was like, hey, I don't think you need to stop playing football here. I understand how your tryout with Argos went. If I can introduce you to some coaches in Germany, would you consider it? And I had some friends in Austria, had some friends in Germany who just lived from school, right? And I wrote them, said, hey, I'm thinking about moving. And I just jumped, took a huge leap of faith, and poof, this is where I landed, right?
Yeah. I think it goes to, I mean, again, your story, I keep repeating it, is a great story in terms of the progression and the steps that you made. And we're going to talk about a bit more of that in a moment. So you mentioned injuries were one of the reasons why playing time starts going downhill, and that comes with the sport, as many of us do know. But at what point in your football career did you begin to think about, okay, what am I going to do next after football? Because I mean, if you don't sort of make it to the pros, or you don't make it at a particular level, even if you do, there's always a plan for what you want to do after ball. For you, when did that occur?
Oh yeah, mine fully hit. Well, the first taste of it was the winter of 2017. It was around December. I had to have a meeting about my shoulder. The doctor came in and said, "Hey, you need to have surgery now if you want to compete in your pro day in February of 2018, and most likely you're going to be out for 7 months." And I looked at him like, "Dude, if I'm out for the pro day, like these coaches, these scouts aren't going to know me. They need to see me compete now." Uh, I skipped the surgery and I tried to start working out, and then I had another meeting around January, and they're like, "Yeah, all right, look, your shoulder just got worse. You're going to be out for 8 months." And I was just so disgruntled. I didn't want to accept that. And that's when I started exploring Germany. I got an offer within like 2 weeks, and I took off. And I played GFL2 with the Montabaur Fighting Farmers. What a beautiful name. Um, and I was playing there for that season. I had a lot of fun. I met a lot of people. But the more important thing is I grew up a lot. I matured a lot as a young man, and just as an athlete in its entirety. Because part of playing GFL2 football, I also had a part-time job. And I was like, wait, so I'm out here in a different country, getting paid to play. I got a free apartment, free car, phone, all that other cute jazz, whatever. But I have to have a part-time job just to live this lifestyle. I don't want to do this. And the part-time job I had was not cool. Like somebody walked up to me at this job and said, "Hey, Kaleb, aren't you doing your master's degree? Or like, don't you have your degree?" I was like, "Yeah, I am." And they looked left, looked right, just like, "Huh, you have like the highest form of education in the entire building." And I just swallowed my tongue and I was like, "Dude, I should not be in here. I got to
Yeah,
go." And I was like, "All
yeah.
right, I got to find out what's next for me."
I think some of the things you've already said have sort of confirmed the way that you like to live your life in terms of, I know you're a man of faith, and you know you like to put things into practice. You taking the leap, number one, leaving the States when you were sort of afraid to do so. Obviously, the States is a big place, and a lot of people, when they move away from there, it's sort of the unknown. You know, you're leaving the box, you're leaving the safe haven almost. But two, like you said, playing in Europe, having a job at the same time, realizing that although you do have the background, the education background, you have a goal and you have a place that you want to be, and you have a method of getting there, which sort of brings me onto my next point. Your involvement with AFI.
Yeah.
AFI, Europe's Elite, we can see you repping the team there. A shout out to Europe's Elite, a very strong brand, a very strong presence of social media. We know you guys, we see you guys putting out the work on a constant basis. But talk to me about that. Talk to me about the AFI, because essentially you cover all of international ball, right?
Yeah. So I'll break down the two and the journey with that because, yeah, it all segues. 2018, I was playing. I wanted to get into something different. I left the States. I left Europe for a month and came back to the States. Like, what am I about to do? I knew my international journey wasn't finished because I fell in love with that bit of growth I was experiencing, but I knew I didn't want to just play. So, end of 18, I actually connected with Europe's Elite first with my co-owner, Evan Harrington. And I knew I had a lot of business skills. I'd actually done a few startup projects in college. And I was like, "Hey, Evan, I can help build Europe's Elite into what it can be or should be." And this was back in 2018, and help our social media. We can help our data collection, help our website really boom for the youth space in international football. Every athlete throughout Europe, Australia, even some of the athletes in West Africa, North Africa who are playing the game of football. And now we have this huge database, this huge Instagram, TikTok, Twitter, Facebook page that it's just booming today.
Yeah.
But in 2019, I think it was January of 2019, I saw the guys from AFI at a convention, and we then started sharing some messages through email and through social media. It's like, "Hey, your social media could be a little better. I could probably help you with that if you're interested." And I started doing that as well. And a lot of people didn't know I was running both pages, running both websites, just because both brands are pretty large when it comes to international football. American Football International covers all of American football outside of North America at the pro level, or at the semi-pro and pro level. So on one site, AFI, anybody who's basically 22 and up playing American football and does not live in the U.S., all those highlights and data and stories written up and some cool pictures and all that stuff. I was collecting that and putting it on a cool social media page with a group of guys, Roger Kelly, John McKinnick. and it's still running, and it's really cool. We got a lot of stuff we have to change constantly because the new leagues like the ELF and how the CEFL have all like altered their stuff, but that's the
Yeah.
pro side. And then I go right back in the same day, and I was doing similar work and more for the youth side with Europe's Elite, which eventually made it clear to me I want to be a scout because I
Yeah.
knew about. I had taken some time to take the skills that I have, or that I was given by God's grace. I'm not going to take all the credit for that. I'm not a fool. I was given some skills and said, okay, I'm good at this. I like football. I love football, but I can't play anymore because my body's not going to let me.
Mm-hmm.
What can I do? Start, stirring the pot, and eventually I got to NFL scout.
I think it speaks volumes, one, I think the work rate and the work ethic and the realization to know that you don't want the journey to end here just because you can't necessarily play to the level you want to play at. So being, again, in the UK, I'm also part of another team. We call ourselves the X's and O's team. And we know, X's and O's team. We know you guys at the AFI and Europe's Elite, we see all the work that you guys do. And we have a lot of people who play. I say a lot of people. We have a lot of athletes who actually, and you will know this yourself, who move from the UK to go and play in the JFL, in all the different leagues around the world, be it Finland, Germany, Austria, because quite frankly, those leagues are booming. They are booming, and a lot we see prospects year after year move from region, from even GFL, Austria to the NFL, to the pros. It happens all the time. So yeah, we see that a lot, and we've seen the progression of the AFI and Europe's Elite, which I think has a few other pages too. I think it has UK Elite as well, and opening up in some other countries too.
Yeah, Europe's Elite, we did something unique last year and wanted to give each country their own vibe, their own presence, and their own style. Because Europe's Elite is just one page, and we're going to share highlights from all these athletes around the world and do these cool rankings, or cool and controversial rankings, some conversation starters. We post stuff about the camps and everything, but it's just the truth. Something that is relevant in the UK with British football may not be relevant to the kid in Czech Republic, or to the kid in Poland, or to the kid in Austria. I mean, heck, the languages are all different in each of those countries I just mentioned. So therefore, we decided to make some different pages and say, hey, well, if there was a huge upset in UK football, post that in there, because it doesn't matter to the rest of Europe. It just matters to those guys who are in that country, and they want their bragging rights. They earn their bragging rights. Let them have that. And that's where we're at. And so on top of that, we also are like gaining more and more, or collecting more and more scouts in the region, so we can have solid rankings for these players and have more feedback and data collection around these players, and let them really know where they are. Give them something to really grade themselves, not based off like, oh, well, this coach thinks this. Is like, hey, this is what you did, and there's another player in your region. Here's his film. Here's his stats. What do you think?
Yeah, no doubt. And it makes so much sense. And again, from a UK standpoint, it ticks all the buttons. Everybody who's trying to get to a certain point playing football, kind of aims to want to be featured on either AFI or sort of Europe's Elite, because at that point they know the masses that are going to see it, where it could potentially lead to. You said the key word, scouts, which is a great segue into my next segment, really. But I want to touch on your coaching time with the Swalker Raiders in Austria. So I just want, in a role like that, does that sort of, I imagine that helps propel you into the world of scouting, because you're on the sidelines, you're in the meetings, you're taking part in everything that's going on in the team. And you're, from a visual standpoint, looking at, I mean, what did you manage? Is it offense, defense? Was it a particular part of the team, or?
Yeah, I'll break it down, man. I was running backs coach for the Swarco Raiders while we were in the AFL. But my role for the Raiders was actually scouting and recruiting, because someone there, a friend of mine, Sean Shelton, dear friend, and Coach Kevin Herron, another dear friend, saw the work that I was doing around Europe and was like, wait, we live in Tyrol, we live in Innsbruck, there's not a lot of talent down here, or there's actually a lot of talent, there's not a lot of players. We need help in scouting and recruiting outside of this area. You know this area more than we do. Can you give me some help? So for me, that was a very solidifying, very uplifting moment of like, wow, I've been doing this website work for 2 to 3 years, and someone's saying, hey, you have value. I want to pay you to do what you're doing.
Yeah.
And if you can come do it in this region, that'd be great. And I was like, all right, cool. But before I even got to Swarco, or before I got to Innsbruck, to the Tiro Raiders, Swarco is actually just our sponsor. Everybody gets
Yeah,
that
yeah,
on that.
yeah.
But before I got to,
It's crazy because
it's
a
the
lot of
thing.
people, a lot of people refer to them as the Swarco Raiders because obviously that's the name that sort of rolls off the
Yeah.
tongue. But yeah,
Like, because I know some guys like, oh man, you live in Swarco. I'm like, Swarco is actually our sponsor. The town is called Innsbruck.
yeah,
But before I got there, I lived in Germany playing ball. And then when I moved to Austria, I actually started, a lot of people don't know, I started in Salzburg, Austria with this club called the Bulls. They don't even exist anymore. This club was about to fold. They were about to fold, but they needed some speed and agility coaches and said, hey, I'll give you a place to stay if you can help us out. And I went down there and I had a job selling A-frame homes with this company in Estonia in the US, but I wasn't getting paid by the team. And I just took a leap and I was like, all right, I'll go. So I was doing the A-frame thing, coaching this little club and building up Europe's elite. So that little club that doesn't exist was like a launching, like it doesn't exist. I wasn't getting paid. They were not competitive. Was not the most organized place. Was the launching pad of a coaching career, if you would say, in Europe. And then from there, I went on to the Vienna Vikings.
Yes.
Great program, great youth program. I was there as a youth coach specifically and helping out their academy, the VFA. I was a speed coach. Great kids. Have a lot of relationships with them. Great people. Can't say it enough. But my time there came to an end, and I went to Swarco because they needed my help. But yeah.
I think one of the things that stands out a lot, which I hope people can take from this episode, is knowing when to move on to the next thing. It seems like obviously you have your plan, you have your milestones, and you have your target in mind, and you're taking your leaps of faith because you know essentially they are going to help to get you to where it is you want to be. And you mentioned even the Vikings, you mentioned Innsbruck, and you mentioned all these places where you've gone in Europe, out of your comfort zone, out of the box, taken jobs to be able to facilitate what you do. And that leads me to the IPP.
Yep.
So the IPP is a program that I know about quite well, being from the UK. Again, there are guys such as James Cook, who you may know, I think you probably know quite well, who was actually my quarterback for during some. Yeah, he was my quarterback for some of my years here with the Kent Exiles. Great guy, great quarterback as well. But all of these different events that you have basically reached out and grabbed. I can only say would have helped massively with your achievement in joining the IPP. Tell me about the IPP. You've done a lot of travel with the IPP around the world. I'm pretty sure I saw you at the International London Combine, where we had a lot of our guys. I mean, one of our guys is now in the CFL. I believe it was in the CFL, David Isenyon. But how did that come about, and what is that program looking like?
Oh, man. So I'll start with how it came about, because that's funny as well. I went to the Cologne Combine in 2019 for the NFL IPP, and the COO of the program, his name is Kaleb Leach, lives in New York. We have the same last name. We connected via email 2 months before, and he just asked me, hey, what are you doing in Europe? What are you doing? What is all this stuff? And I told him some of the same stories I just told you. We stayed in contact, and there was potential opportunity to start then. Boom, COVID hits, everything slows down in 2020. But the program still needed to continue on and find scouts and find recruits that year. As I mentioned before, I just moved to Innsbruck around August, September of 2020. And I'm serious, like God works in some crazy ways. I just moved there in 2020, and ironically, the NFL IPP with James Cook, Will Bryce, we're going around Europe. In September, October, we're going around Germany, Austria, and Sweden to host a few small, closed combines. They needed some help on locations and travel and how to get there. And they actually stopped in Innsbruck, Austria. Wow. And pulled up and was like, oh, snap, Kaleb, you're here? I was like, yeah, hey, how you doing? Nice to see you again.
Yeah.
I haven't seen you in a year or so. And we just start talking shop, talking players, talking about the scene around Europe and whatnot. And it was not an official interview, if you'll say, but it was an interview of Kaleb, what do you know? Who do you know? Who do you not know? Okay, dang, we need to add this guy to the team. And that's how I got involved with the NFL IPP at that moment. And it was literally, again, based off all the work I'd done with Europe's Elite, AFI, and said, I know the lay of this land pretty well. I know these coaches, know this language, I know the football scene. What do you want to do? And it's blossomed to this past year. We got to do the entire scouting throughout Europe. Marcel Dabo, Adelaide Dio. I mean, like every player. Thomas Adekoye. All these guys that if there was a guy who came through Europe, I can 100%, Ralph Russins, I can 100% say if he came from a European country, I 100% knew about this guy and wrote some kind of report, some kind of one-liner about who this athlete is, what country he's from, what the football's like. We need to scout this guy.
Yeah, and that in itself is it speaks volumes. Once again, I have to say it's very impressive, very, very impressive, because you are laying almost like the blueprint here for so many other people who may wish to do what it is that you're doing right now. But what you've also done is you've shown people the hard work that's needed, the sacrifice that you need to sometimes take. Again, it's all about putting yourself in the situations where, yes, you may not know what's coming next, but at the end of the day, if you know where you're trying to get to, these are the things that you're going to have to do. And again, the IPP, great program. Some of the names you mentioned, obviously guys that we know, UK guys. I think Marcel Dabo is now with the Colts, which are my team. I know I've got the Raiders jersey on. I'm just a Waller fan. I'm a Darren Waller fan, but I'm a Colts fan. So shout out to Marcel Dabo. And it just leads me to ask you the question about scouting in itself.
Yeah.
So scouting as a job, what does that entail? Because scouting is a huge, the NFL or football alone, whether it be Div 1, Div 2, JUCO, it's a business, a huge business. And two, so many players and people in difficult times and families and whichever situation in life, it's a way for them to express themselves, a way for them to see themselves out, a way for them to better their lives. Scouting plays a humongous part in football. Yeah. What does scouting actually entail? What does it actually mean for the people who are involved in the sport but don't necessarily know the finer details? What is scouting? What is it all about? What does it mean?
Absolutely. I'll give you a broad answer, and then I'll break it down based on some locations and levels as well.
Okay.
Scouting is simply evaluating players that play the game of American football who could potentially fit a different roster at their next potential level. So whether that be U16 going up to U19, U19 to the high school level in the US, or high school level to college level to pro, you are still evaluating a player based off his potential to move to the next level and how he can fit a roster for that upcoming team. That's the broad answer of what scouting is and how it looks and how it's done. You'll watch a lot of film, little highlights, more game film, usually like a minimum 3 to 5 games of one player. You could be watching a cornerback. Like, for example, I was watching Marcel Dabo. I'd watch 3 of his games. But as I'm watching Marcel, there might be another linebacker or a receiver or a quarterback who pops up on film like, dang, he's pretty good. Let me do some research. And I'll write down his name, height, weight, just a quick description of who he is, what he does on the field. And that's the thing. That's the facts of scouting. You write what that player does on the field. Yeah. If you're a running back and someone tells me before, like, oh, this man is a world beater, he can run a 4.3, he can jump over 10 people, he can block really well, all these things. And I turn on the tape and it's like, well, I watched 3 games and he fumbled 5 times and he missed 4 blocks. Yeah. And he got walked down from 50 yards out when he finally broke out. And he got walked down by a D lineman. He doesn't run a 4.3. So like you have to write what you see. That's scouting in itself. And it's really, I love it. I love watching somebody's tape and just giving them an answer of like, this is what I saw. This is how I can evaluate you as a player. This is what I believe he will fit or she will fit in the next level that they are trying to get to.
Yeah.
Now, in each country and each level, that does look different. Like you might not necessarily scout a U16 guy or a middle school guy going into high school and be like, oh, well, he's going to be the world's greatest. That doesn't happen. All right. Yeah. In basketball, you might meet a guy who's, 6'5" or close to 2 meters. And you're like, he's going to the NBA. Yeah. Those people exist. Football, if you can ball, you can ball. Height, weight, size, speed, all those things are looked at. But if you are just super productive at your position in this sport, That's what I see.
Yeah.
And scout jobs are to see that. So I might not scout a guy at the U16 or middle school level to the high school, but usually high school or U19 all the way to pro is where scouting work is really, really done and gets really detailed. So yeah, it's my thing. I really love it.
No doubt.
Like,
I mean,
yeah.
it makes it interesting because when you see, and someone who, as I watch the NFL, when you see guys, and this is obviously the top of the level now, and we're going to move to the NFL shortly, but when you see guys on film and you see guys on game day and they do things unworldly like Kamara or Christian McCaffrey, and you hear the commentators or the analysts say something about how they were scouted and the traits you mentioned, if someone says that this particular guy can do X, Y, and Z, and they can do X, Y, and Z, kind of like hit jackpot a little bit. Obviously, the athlete still has to be able to put in the work and produce, but I want to link it to the current day. So where we are now in terms of you and your career and your scouting career. You recently announced that you are going to be scouting for the Carolina Panthers, which is huge news. So firstly, congratulations, because again, this is what I allude to when I talk about the story. For the guys watching and the girls watching, Kaleb, your story has gone from you playing your ball in the States, realizing where you wanted to take it, and actually putting in the work, making the sacrifice to make the leaps to get you to where you are today. So huge congratulations.
Thank you.
Obviously, we know for people watching, the Carolina Panthers are a team in the NFL. I mentioned one of their stars, Christian McCaffrey, the running back. So I guess you guys will have some close links there in terms of the position. But without obviously giving away the secrets and everything else in terms of how it happened, how you got to the Carolina Panthers, how did that happen and what is it like? I mean, just if you could briefly touch on the scouting that's involved for a team in the NFL, what does that look like?
Not a problem. I have no problem sharing how that happened. And the first thing I will say to everyone is that old saying is your net work is your net worth. Oh. The people who you surround yourself with, the people who you get to meet, the people who you try to meet, the crowds and communities that you try to get involved with will really, really determine how far and which directions you go in life. And that's what basically happened in my situation, which every bit of the journey, step by step. I know God's got his plan, and I'll be praying about it like, dude, hey, this doesn't make any sense. This is really muddy. I don't understand where you're taking me. He's like, all right, dude, just be quiet. I got you. and I'm going to need you to step out on some faith and go this way. And I'm like, yeah, but I'm kind of hungry. Like, I ain't got no meals over here. And I literally did all the work for IPP, just to bring it back. Did all the work for IPP this year. And then around New Year's, around January of this year, I came to the States for the first time in about 5 years or 6 years for New Year's. I haven't done New Year's here in a long time, and my brother's got a new apartment and things, so I came and celebrated with them. And the Panthers Stadium is about a 10-minute walk from my brother's apartment.
Wow.
So we're sitting around and it's like, hey, man, would you ever consider moving down here with us and like maybe work for them? And I was like, yeah, I mean, that'd be cool, but I don't know anyone there. I just started texting around, seeing if someone knew anyone who was with the Carolina Panthers, like just knew someone. And maybe I could go into the office and shake a hand. Mm-hmm. My boy, Evan Harrington, ironically or thankfully, knew someone who he used to work with in Washington, who is now with the Carolina Panthers. And I was like, hey, I'm not looking for a job or anything. I actually just want to get to know some people. And like you said, I want to know what the day-to-day is like. How can I get better?
Yeah.
We're on the phone for about 15 minutes with the director of college scouting there at the Panthers. And at first it was literally just a catch up and a little bit of education of like, this is the role, this is how it goes, all that jazz. And he's like, honestly, man, you present yourself pretty well. Have you ever considered moving back to the States? Would you ever consider working for a team versus just the league? And I kind of took a deep breath and was like, I mean, hadn't considered it, but I'd be excited to consider something like that. Went to the NFL Combine in March, met him in person. I met the director and a few of his colleagues in person. And then I met another set of directors with Houston Texans and another set with the 49ers. So I started to meet a lot of people. So then I had about 3 to 4 official interviews, and I had 2 official offers to work as an NFL scout with a team this summer, all the way out throughout the year. Wow. And I ended up choosing the Carolina Panthers.
Hey, there it is. I love that. Keep bounding.
Keep bounding, baby.
what I mean, I continue to say it again. The story is just so inspiring, but mainly because you have proven to everybody and again, people that watch this episode, this is what it looks like. Sometimes you mentioned you didn't want to leave the US. You didn't know what was out there. The US is a big place. You guys fly from state to state. Over here in the UK, we hop in a car, up the road and we're somewhere else. But the fact that you are sitting here, and I see your post and I was like, I got to speak to this guy. I have to speak to this guy because not only have I wanted to speak to a scout, but with a story as amazing as that, there was no way that I could, not get in touch. And so it leads me to ask you, before we do wrap up, what does a day in the life of Kaleb Leach look like?
Sure. Every day, every weekday, and sometimes I slack on the weekends, I try my best to be up at 5 a.m. And whether I'm in Europe or in the US, I try my best to be up at 5 a.m. That way I can start my day saying my literal practice is to say, thank you, God, for waking me up. That's what I try to have my first words and thought. And then I have a whole prayer meditation time. I can listen to some gospel music to start my day the right way of praising, thanking God, and starting my day in a positive mindset. Yeah. Right? Like, you got to pay attention to what music you're taking into your body, into your spirit, into your mind, or what information you're taking in from your phone. So I start early with that. Some prayer, meditation. I even stretch a little bit because my back gets tight. We're getting older out here, right?
Yeah. I know the feeling.
Just being real. And then afterwards, it's all about, for at least 3 hours, I'm diving deep into what I've divided with AFI, what I've divided with Europe's Elite, what social media posts have to be up, who do I need to contact, who's running our page, like, hey, what is done with this, what's done with that. I go back to my message box and message one of our interns, like, how much data has been collected on Europe's Elite website, whose profiles need to be edited, and then we have another guy. I'm like, all right, which profiles and players are we evaluating this week? How many have them been done? Which reports have you done? How can I help you get better? Because these guys who are working with me with Europe's Elite, they're younger. They are also wanting a similar journey. Like, hey, I want to be an NFL scout one day, or I want to be a college scout one day. And no, I can't always pay everybody, but I will be upfront. And it's like, if you're helping me, I will do my best to help you. And if you want to have a network like I have, cool. Do this work. I'll introduce you to everybody who I can. Or do this work and I'll help you get to an event that will help your network expand. That's just from 6 to 9. After we get all the social media posts and contacting all these players. From 9 to 12, you actually go through the website and see what articles need to be posted. Articles are done. Anytime we got all the articles on each website's done before 12, the rest of the day is dedicated to watching film. Just watching players film, whether it's a highlight, whether it's games, whether it's just a few videos that someone's parent sent in or a coach sent in, just watching a bunch of film, literally from like 10:30 to almost like 2 o'clock. Sometimes in between there, I try to remember to eat lunch and I try to put my phone away, take a walk, and just go buy some food somewhere.
Yeah.
From 2 to 5, still watching a bunch more film, but now I'm on the phone with some more coaches and saying, hey, who is so-and-so? Where's he from? Why did he do this during this game? Is he hurt? What's wrong with him? All right, we'll keep going. And then some other coaches from Europe will actually text me and say, hey, Kaleb, I need a lineman. You know anybody? I need a linebacker. I need a quarterback. Some coaches from the U.S. like, dude, I just saw this guy on Twitter. He's a defensive end. He's from France. He's from Germany. What do you know about him? I tell him what I know. And that's literally, it's about 5 o'clock at night. So around 5, 6, whether I'm in the U.S. or Europe, so at 5 p.m. in the U.S. is what, 1700 Central European time, or 1800 is 6 p.m. That's my entire day. Then I try to go work out,
right, to
clear my mind. I have a routine where it's like mind, body, and spirit. That's like my goals every day, is just to actually work on those. My new goal, I'm gonna add financial goals into that. It's gonna be my 4th point. But yeah, I literally go about 12 hours a day of trying to chip away at making sure the websites are correct, making sure that my scouting sheets are correct or need to be improved. Like, I don't watch Netflix.
Like, and a lot of people, I think a lot of people are going to be like, what? But you're not the first person that I've heard say this. When you know what it is you're chasing and what it is you're doing, you kind of put those things to the wayside. Like, you have your day regimented. And I like to use the phrase that I've heard before, reach one, teach one, which is exactly what you said you do. So that doesn't shock me at all in the slightest.
No, like my TV show happens to be a game film. It's like, oh, instead of watching Stranger Things, I'm watching the Panthers versus Saints from 2021.
Yeah,
Or I'm watching the Swarco Raiders versus Vienna Vikings from
yeah,
2021 and 2019. And
yeah,
that's my TV. And sometimes it does get a little like, I'm a little football crazy. I need to go outside for a walk. But that's my thing. And
yeah,
it takes time.
yeah, absolutely. And with that, I think that brings us to the end of, I have to say, an amazing episode. You have dropped gem after gem after gem, not only for players and athletes, but people, like you say, who are trying to emulate what you've done as a scout. And again, everybody watching, appreciate you guys tuning in. If you haven't, if you haven't learned a lot from that, then I'm sure you will if you rewatch it and listen to what Kaleb has said, because the information that he has shared is you can't get that. That's just extremely valuable life points. Kaleb, thank you so much for coming on. I appreciate you, taking the time out of your day. Your extremely busy schedules, we now know, you got that, you got those schedules throughout your day to come and talk to me and share that knowledge. And again, everybody, you can find this episode. It'll be out on YouTube. It's Georgeonsports across all social platforms, and we have a lot more episodes coming soon. So make sure you keep it locked. But Kaleb, again, thank you so much. And I'll tell you what, I would love to do this again close to the start of the season, or even if you have time during the season, because I can only imagine the kind of stories you'd have at that point when you're scouting for the Carolina Panthers.
Most def, man. Like, we want to hop on again August, September. We definitely could do that. I'll share a bunch of stories, because that's another thing. Like, the access to information that a lot of us miss out on when we have goals is usually how we fail or don't come up short to our goals. So if I can share some info of like, hey, this is what I did, you can learn from that and avoid some of the mistakes I did, or you can do some of the same things I did to get you where you got to go. Absolutely would do. I've had a great time being on the show. And the last thing I will say to everyone is keep your faith in God, put that first. Actually take some time to listen to the message that is being given and really just like take that in, and then everything else, write it down. Write whatever you got to do, write it down, go through your points step by step, and it's possible.
Kaleb, until we speak again, this has been George on Sports. I'm your host, George Couture, and we'll see you soon.